Welcome back to OverThink, the Overwatch game show where I ask contestants hot takes and see where they stand, with the 3 circles representing the disagree stance, the neutral stance, and the agree stance. The lines in between representing the somewhat stances. If you didn't know, anybody could participate in this game show. I have open signups in my Discord server, so feel free to sign up there. Also, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. I also host these live on Twitch, so go follow me there. And if you want to suggest any hot takes or themes for future episodes, please comment them down below as well. On today's episode, I've invited 8 DPS players to find out what we've all been wondering. Do all DPS players think the same? Let's find out. The Widow nerfs are a good change. Go.
I just feel like in high ranks, Widow kind of holds the lobby hostage and is basically the admin of the whole lobby. She's almost untouchable, and I feel like the change just reduces her range, so she's a little bit more diveable now, and I think it's okay for the game, at least in high ranks.
I think on certain maps she was really strong, so like ones that are basically just straight line, like Circuit Royale or Junkertown, and she's a little weaker on some of the closer maps. So I think it was more so of the maps that she was just really strong on, but the ability to just one shot, I don't know, in general has always been pretty controversial, but I think she's been strong like almost the entire time Overwatch has been out. I think it's a good start. Maybe they can compensate her range nerf in another way.
So I think it's a good thing because you don't need to position yourself as much as you used to, you know? Because a lot of support players would have a hard time dealing with the Widow when they can't do much except, you know, Kiriko, where you'd have to flank her and kill her and just position like really like tightly. So I feel like that's a good thing for the support players, I guess.
I completely think it's a very bad nerf since they just nerf her health as well. And I feel like they don't know what they want to do with Widowmaker, because the nerf for the health was so she couldn't really stand that far back without being challenged, because then with the health nerf, now an Ashe can challenge her, Cassidy can challenge her, but since they also nerfed the range now, you have to play even closer. Both the nerfs contradict each other, so it's just gonna make her too easy to kill since she's forced to stay closer, and she's only good on certain maps. Like a lot of people think she's completely unstoppable on Junkertown or Circuit Royale, but on the second point of both those maps, she's still kind of easy to counter because it's so close ranged. So she's not the best at any map anymore like she used to be, at least on like first point. I just overall think she needs to have some sort of compensation to make her more viable now again, because she hasn't really been played in Overwatch League either for a very long time now.
Support as a role is overtuned and needs nerfs. Go.
I feel like a bunch of support skits are a little bloated too much, and they're almost as good as DPS heroes. I think they just have very cheesy abilities, like for example, Bap's Lamp, Kiriko's Suzu and her TP ability. She just has high damage output. Bap also has high damage output. I also think Ana has high damage output. It's just like there's a lot of support heroes that can kind of compare to DPS heroes, and if not do more than DPS.
So I'm neutral just because I do flex to support sometimes, but I feel like the reason why I'm neutral is that because it's a support character, right? So they're not just there to heal, they're there to do multiple things. So you could have a support who does as much damage as a DPS, but their healing isn't great, but their abilities are used to support their team, so therefore they're classed as support. And I think that's why I kind of struggle with this question.
I somewhat disagree, because I know that some of the healers supports are kind of OP right now. I'm kind of looking at Kiriko, honestly. But the high damage and abilities that are like to do more DPS related stuff, I think is more so to get out of situations, because I've played a little bit of support, and I experienced a lot of the other team diving for me and my team not reacting to like try and get me a little bit of help. So having a lot of damage can help me get out of those situations, stay alive for the rest of my team, and like keep them alive, you know?
I don't feel like supports, or healers rather, are especially overtuned, because they have to balance out both healing and DPSing output at the same time. So if you do too much DPS, you're not going to be able to heal as much, which means your teammate's going to probably die. If you do too much healing, you're not going to do as much pressure to the enemy team. It kind of balances, but the only thing why I'm not on completely disagree is because Kiriko's damage on her Kuna is way too high, and Nurse's mobility is quite annoying, and her damage boost is also making it very hard to balance the DPS characters in the game.
I'd like to change.
Yeah, go ahead. Where are you going to?
Somewhat agree. Yeah, after I walked over to disagree, I thought of Lamp and Suzu, and I was like, I should probably change my answer.
Oh, I would like to also change to somewhat agree, just because there are some abilities like I think Discord Orb, Lamp, and Suzu that might need to be a little bit reworked.
All right. So majority of why people are here pretty much like Suzu Lamp, like anything with like any sort of invulnerability or immortality. All right, Blizzard, take notes. I believe they should add more crowd control on DPS heroes. Go. A big reason why I asked this is because, you know, the recent update, we have May having some sort of like crowd control now. We have Cassidy's nade has been changed, so now it does, you know, a bit more of the crowd control. Things that they removed with Overwatch 2, they're starting to kind of bring back. So I just kind of wanted to see where everybody stands with that and what you guys think.
Okay, so I mainly play Cassidy's my most played hero, and I mostly played him in Overwatch 1. And not a lot in Overwatch 2, but in Overwatch 1, the flashbang was definitely, I'd say it's iffy in certain situations. Being able to like it was mostly a problem if you were like hiding around a corner and you would just insta delete someone with right click. That's what kind of made it more broken. Now we have the grenade, which is I think really, really bad. It has like the weirdest tracking like ever. Like it will just completely orbit the sun and then come back and still stick someone and just like disable your movement. And CC is, you kind of have to be careful now in Overwatch 2 with only like one tank for mitigation. So I think they should just completely rework how they have it now, and they just gotta like keep in mind that one tank now is like it's basically a like way more different game.
Coming from same as he was from Overwatch 1 and Overwatch 2, I mostly main Cassidy. Recently, as much as I enjoyed the new changes of the buffs for Cassidy, it's definitely like just not good for the game in my opinion. Like the amount of times where like I could stop a Ryan charge or like Doomfist punch and basically letting my team have the opportunity to like basically ruin the day of a tank player. It seems like such an easy way to fight in a game, in a strategic team-based game. It's such a step backwards because a lot of people didn't like it back in Overwatch 1. So it's just as a cast main overall, it's just not a good change.
I think the more CC they add, like Pixel said, it will mess up with the tanks. But I also feel like, again, to me, like that seems more like something a support could do, as like an extra thing to add to their repertoire of things. As someone who does flex between the two, that would be like my main job, is to help people and stop things from happening to my team. And so I feel like it should be left to tank and support.
I enjoyed goats. Go. So interesting how it is compared to the tank episode, which, you know, makes sense. But all right, cool.
I enjoyed goats to somewhat of a degree because it was a lot of team play, a lot of callouts. It was really fun. But I do really enjoy playing Widowmaker. Okay, I have a lot of hours on Widow, so the fact that I couldn't really play DPS and it was very difficult to, it was sad. But it was the most fun team like based comp more than anything else. Yeah.
I'm gonna somewhat disagree because personally I wanted to play DPS during that like meta, thinking I could somehow squeeze my DPS role in it, but you just couldn't. You're just like, they just would not die in the other team. So my friends would like kind of push me either pick a tank or a support, and then I would obviously just pick a support or a tank to help them out. But like, yes, we win, but at the same time it's not as fun as say as DPS role.
I felt like Goats was a easy way of trying to win the game. I felt like it was a low skill, high reward type of comp. I was not a big fan of it, and then I felt like it was a little too much for the game.
Did you play Doom in Goats? What were you playing?
Yeah, I was only playing Doom, Genji, and Tracer.
Hitscan is easier than projectile. Go.
I've played Hitscan basically for all the DPS I play. It's mainly Hitscan. So when I say Hitscan is easier, I think it's, you know, you just put your crosshair where the enemy is and you shoot. However, I think it's this might be controversial, but I think it's balanced out by Hitscans typically having lower burst damage. Well, some of them, not all of them. I think that's very dependent on which one you play, but when I like play Soldier, I feel like sometimes my effectiveness isn't as strong because, you know, just Hitscan, because they lowered soldiers' damage at the start of Overwatch 2, like by quite a bit. But I do think it's just point and click. It's not that hard.
So I guess if you play other games, it's way easier to transition, you know, because aiming is way like it's kind of the same, but it's really not. But it's muscle memory. As to kind of projectile aiming, for me at least personally, it's way harder to adapt that same muscle memory. Because when you transition games, it's just easier, I guess.
I think when it comes to projectile compared to Hitscan, projectile you can either be lucky, which means you're probably going to get a lot of picks without having a lot of skill or having to actually aim, but it also takes a lot of skill to be consistent in that regard. While Hitscan is primarily only your aim and no luck, because you actually have to aim because you can't really have any luck in that regard. So it's like 50-50 in my opinion of what is hard or not, because there's no luck involved in Hitscan, but there's luck involved in projectile, but you can't really be lucky in Hitscan, but you can be lucky in projectile. So
Since I'm playing controller, it's a little bit harder to track. And whenever I compare my Hitscan accuracy to projectile, it's much lower. I think that's just because on what I'm playing on. The only Hitscan I ever play is Widowmaker, sometimes Sojourn and Soldier, but the accuracy is very low. But that's about it.
Yeah, I think it's just the way that my brain is built, honestly, because I haven't heard a lot of people, like I'm on PC, and I prefer projectile a lot more because I can see where my bullet is going to go, and I can kind of anticipate people's movements a little bit better than if I have to aim directly at the person.
DPS is the hardest role in the game. Go.
I think like DPS is the hardest role in the game right now in Overwatch 2 since there's not two tanks. And tanks doesn't really have the biggest impact in the game right now. It's more for the DPS to carry and get the picks when it comes to like team fights and so on.
The only reason why I said somewhat agree is because I don't play support or tank technically, so I don't really want to say that it's the hardest role, but I do think DPS has characters that have the highest skill ceilings in the game that can't be compared to tank or support. Still play Doom, but I don't actually play tanks. I have no idea how to play tank.
I like to somewhat disagree because yes, DPS I would say is the most easiest because all you have to do is just look at a person and kill that person. That's it. But I will say there's also like other like fractions into that where like you have to make sure you know the maps, rotate around, you have to make sure that you know their flanks, watch over the tank or supports, take out their supports on the back line. There's just a lot of like different variables on the situation, I guess, on DPS.
So I completely disagree with Kenzo. I'm so sorry. But I feel like picks do not matter at all. No matter what you do, as a DPS player, I've gotten a lot of... If I don't get more than 3, it does not matter what you do. Yes, the DPS might be the easiest role to learn, but it's the hardest role to climb in. Because I feel like if you don't have a good tank, you're not going anywhere. Like anywhere in the game.
I think that DPS is the easiest role by far just because of the range of characters and how easily they are able to adapt to certain situations. Compared to like tanks and supports, they have a limited amount of characters and it's not like easy for them to adapt. While in DPS, it could be like game changing. Like if let's say one person switches to Metra in like a certain map, that it could be game changing in so many different ways, or even Widow. But that is my take on this.
I'd like a debate to be sparked for this one. I want to do 2-on-2 for this. So if we get Kenzo and Quaked on that side, sick. And then Vivian, do you want to jump in on this? Because I know you said you disagree with
Yes,
Kenzo.
please.
Okay,
Yes,
get in on
please.
this. And then who would like to be on Vivian's side?
I will.
So for a debate, you guys are welcome to like talk over each other, snatch weaves, curb stomp each other. I don't care. Get me views, whatever y'all gotta do, and then just kiss and hug at the end, so I don't get canceled for, you know, having you guys kill each other. All right, cool. Take it away whenever you're ready.
Vivian mentioned that picks don't matter. I highly disagree with that. I want to see why do you think picks don't matter?
Well, it's because every time I play in a game, you know, I feel like I have to I have to hit every single shot in order to get a pick. And even if I get a pick, right, nothing happens. The tank doesn't go in, supports don't give a, you know, I'm not gonna say the word.
Can I ask a question? Are you getting picks when it matters the most though, before a team fight when everyone is grouped up? So you're 5 versus 4 instead?
Yeah, 100%. Maybe it's the rank I'm playing in, but...
You're Masters though, right?
I peaked GM3, and then it happened there as well, so...
I was gonna I'm not trying to disagree with my buddy on the side here, but it definitely timing does matter. I'd say the biggest thing that, especially as you go up, like I'd say from Diamond to Masters, I think the biggest thing that DPS struggle with is their engagement timing. So if I kill 4 or 3, but the fight's already over, then it kind of doesn't really matter. But I will say that I think it's really hard when you don't have a skilled, no, I wouldn't say a skilled tank, but I think a tank really does make a huge difference, especially when it comes to certain maps. So I'd say like it's more dependent on the map, but like if I have like maybe not a great tank on like Junkertown, where I have more room to flank and give myself more options to possibly swing the fight in our favor just with DPS, then it's more doable. But if it's like a really small map, like that doesn't have much flanking, then I have a harder time like trying to carry. But I definitely do think that there's some points or games where if I get 2 at the start of the fight, we still lose, and you know, maybe it comes down to something else. But I definitely think that there's both are valid arguments.
What I think is too that all DPS, or not all, but certain DPS have a higher skill cap in which you get more value the better you are at the character compared to like tank or support. I think like Mercy, you only like left click or right click. And tank, most of the tank heroes you don't really need that much aim or mechanical skill. It's more like holding a shield or you're standing in front of your team and doing what you have to do instead of having to do something very specific to out tank the enemy tank.
Also, one more thing about my take, right? So there's a character in the game that exists. It's called Mercy, right? Don't come for me, Mercy mains, but you know, when I get a pick, most of the time I don't really get Mercies on my team. I don't know why, maybe I have bad luck, but I don't get Mercies on my team. And on the enemy team, I've seen it so many times. My tank is just sitting there looking at the Mercy res and not doing absolutely anything about it. It's really sad. It's really sad.
I feel like that's like a Mercy issue rather than a DPS issue. Also, I think when you guys are saying how picks don't matter, I feel like maybe it could be a target priority issue. So for example, like let's say you killed a Zenyatta on the enemy team and you killed another like a Cassidy, you get 2 picks, but the enemy team has Nanoblade and they use Nanoblade to win the fight. I think even though you got 2 picks, you didn't kill the right target, so that's kind of just like a skill issue at that point. You kind of have to prioritize targets.
But also, let's not talk about the Junker Queen ult. She was getting it like that, like in a second. There's nothing I can do about that.
But that also proves it's easier to play tank than it's to play DPS because you get so much value for doing so little.
I agree.
I mean, it is easier to play tank, but it's harder to climb on DPS for that exact reason. But there's not a lot of people who know how to play tank correctly, I feel like.
I think it's also just I'm still pretty confident on the map issue sometimes. Like Circuit Royale, I think is probably one of the worst maps. I think it's worse than Horizon. I think that the flanking part is I'm maintaining the flanking part. Like if I have no room, like second point, Circuit Royale is probably just like the worst spot to push because the flank routes are basically just if you take them and you don't get anything, then it's just a throw. And it's like a really long walk back, and it's like all high ground up there.
Doesn't that make you DPS hard in general because of that issue? Because in Circuit Royale, you can just play Sigma, and that's like meta right now to play Sigma on Circuit Royale. And all you have to do is put your shield and left click, making it very easy. Compared to playing DPS on Circuit Royale, we have to find different flank routes, and you have to try to get picks and so on.
Maybe it's also just a difference across the ranks.
Yeah.
Just every rank's different.
And also, like, it feels sometimes impossible to just, like, off-angle or do anything because you just get two-shot by a support, you know? Even in the middle of the fight, you've had these times where you're, as Tracer, for example, you're behind them and you're shooting at them while the fight is still going. You have 2 supports distracted, but you still lose. Why? Because the tank is... It happens to me all the time. And I don't know, it's just very disappointing.
I've had games where I would distract 2 supports as Tracer, but like we still lose the fight. But at that point, I have to change the way I engage the enemy team and probably not distract the supports, rather go for picks or look for follow-ups on what my team is doing. You kind of just have to change your playstyle in every single game.
And also, what was the general question now again of what we're debating about?
So the actual debate question is DPS is the hardest role in the game.
Because I feel like everything we've been talking about so far is completely agrees with that DPS is harder because you have to try to find out so many different ways on how to make DPS work on certain maps and how to play and so on.
That's the thing I was trying to say earlier, is I feel like it's easy to learn, but it's very difficult to climb on. That's what I like. You can learn to play Kree, but you don't really have him learned, if you know what I mean. I
You're
guess
referring to
that's
like
how
game
I-
sense?
I mean, I guess so, yeah.
I think you should be on our side, to be honest.
Fine. No.
Were y'all converting Vivian?
Yes.
Maybe.
Have
I'll
they
take
kind
it.
Well,
of had they kind of changed your stance? Because like, you know, a debate could end like that. If you think that their argument is correct and you want to change your stance, then go for it.
I would, but I'm too hot-headed.
I mean, if we take
Um,
statistics into consideration, most high-ranked DPS players are high-ranked, or like GM at least, on their off roles, which is support and tank as well, compared to tank players or support players, which usually aren't as high-ranked on their secondary roles, which means that they've gained a lot of skill playing DPS, in where they
But
can
is-
convert it and make it a lot easier to play support and tank because they're easy to play.
But is that from mechanics? Because I'm also
Mechanics,
masters
game sense.
on support and just easy to aim.
Because
So
if
I
a
can
tank
agree
player
with you.
in general can't really get high ranked in DPS, they can on tank, but a DPS player can get high ranked on both DPS and tank, which makes tank easier.
I would say tank
Same
is the
with support.
easiest.
So if not DPS being the hardest, then Vivian and Tyrethian, what role do you think is the hardest?
Support.
Wait, I don't even know why I said DPS is... Wait, let me think about it real quick. Yeah,
Like,
I
if
think I
I'm-
might change my stance.
You gonna change your
Like if
stance?
I'm,
Go ahead. Get on their side. And I'll stare at Tyrethian.
Ah.
I was just thinking like if we're talking about just like solo climbing, I think support is probably one of the harder ones.
Say that
That's
on
just
top
my
of 100
opinion,
Mercy
though.
mains.
Whoa,
Well, I mean, if you solo queue, I think it can be a little harder. But if you have like a duo or like if you have a group you play with, I think it could be a little easier. But I definitely think that, in my opinion, I think it's support. Like maybe DPS is really close to support, but I think tank is definitely the easiest role in the game.
I can agree with that support is harder to climb on if you solo queue than DPS, but it's also because the matchmaking and just overall how the game works is kind of messed up right now. But in mechanical and game sense standpoint, I find support easier than DPS.
Yeah, I understand. I'm agreeing with your points. I don't know if I should move or not though.
Yeah, you should come over to our side, I think.
Damn, a debate where everybody's been converted. So we have actually one special last question. This one is the most serious question of the night. Genji is hotter than Hanzo. Go. All right, so everybody in the disagree is wrong. So we'll end it on that. Genji supremacy. But with that being said, thank you guys for coming on to this show.
Anything's fine.
Oh my god, Quake just bladed the camera! Quake just bladed the viewers!
To the 1, to the 1, to the 3. I play easy mode, and I play to win. I love to die, and I like to BRB. All systems checked out, group up with me. 2 to the 1, to the 1, to the 3. I'm here to party. GG. A giant gorilla can keep up with me. You can't be serious. I'm the queen bee. Get out of the way. I'm the MVP. Move